Meet me at the Chazen. I'm your host, Gianofer Fields. As we work towards a better understanding of what the Emancipation Project is, it's important to know how the working parts were assembled. I'm in Gallery 4, where Thomas Ball's Emancipation Group has lived at the Chazen for nearly 50 years. Mark Hines is the creative director of the project, and according to him, the answer to getting everything together is science.
I'm Mark Hines, creative director of the MASK Consortium. I'm laughing because emancipation is the seed that I watched grow from, inception to being planted to sitting under the ground for a very long time until it popped up and was a stalk and then started to bear arms and leaves and we don't even know what the fruit is going to be yet, right? So for me, it's a process and an evolution. It started as one thing that I would have answered that question one way initially, and I probably would have changed that answer 3 or 4 times now. So I think the answer I just gave you is probably the most accurate right now. I'm an engineer. I'm also an artist. I do work in many mediums, but I'm actually an engineer first and by training. And in my collaborations with Sanford, it's often there's an idea in his head, and he doesn't quite know how to necessarily manifest it, but he knows what he's trying to achieve, and I help bring those ideas to bear in various mediums. This is in some cases. He works broadly and in many places where I'm not there, but when we collaborate, it has worked like that for a lot of it.
Talk to me about this group coming together.
I studied computer graphics, music, and network theory. So network theory, especially in the 90s, this is pre-social networks, social media, everything. But everything about what those are is inside of this theory that I studied deeply and was moved by. Because although it is theory, while you study it, you see applications in history of these nodal groups, how people organize themselves, what the shapes of those organizations look like, and what they bring about when they combine. It's phenomena oriented, so it could be nature, it could be elements and how they interact or don't interact. It could be any number of things that you could use network theory and study a grouping of things, like things or unlike things, and how they interact over a period of time. I saw the efficacy of applying network theory to relationships and the ability to bring about something that you more likely than not would not be able to. No one of those entities could have maybe made that thing happen, but collectively they could. And my experimentations in this over time have just brought to bear the overwhelming data that if you can get people to work together to do something, they're gonna get something done faster than one person doing it. And so it's almost one of my mediums, working in network theory as applied to people and problems and solutions. That's one of the brushes that I have available when I'm painting to work on something. So when you are a good student, I think, of network theory, you understand how you can impact that network, but you also understand that it is an organism. There is only so much you can control, and it's not your job to control it. It's your job to stimulate an end and choose the right ingredients, the right components that can bring that about. And if you can get those nodes to interact towards a particular end, you can achieve something. And it's very counter to American and Western culture, which is hierarchical by design, okay? And so network theory for me is my response to racism. It is my response to the struggle that I have grown up inside of. I guess I shouldn't be saying this because I'm giving out my secret, but I'm literally saying, like, it's what I've been able to bring to bear to get things done. There's a connectivity, the acknowledgement that we are all connected. We are one. Fundamentally is the universal truth that I've come to understand, and that is consistent with my application of network theory, and my use of it hasn't been disproven yet. I believe in this, and it allows my ego to not be the thing. It's because it isn't.
Is there a point when you're using this theory, this network theory, is there a point when you go, yes? What are the markers that lead you to know that this is working? Or are there, you could say there aren't any, but are there, like, because that's the way that I think, like.
Well, there have to be. I'm a scientist in this category, so I know I'm trying things and I'm looking for a result. If I don't get the result, then I have to change something about the algorithm, test again. Oh, I get a better result? Cool, but is there something to modify? So there's a constant review of what we're trying to achieve and what's the current mechanism that is being used. That's a combination of the people and the processes. So inside of that, there's a sort of a recursive assessment and a clarity about what we're trying to achieve. So yes, there are markers that we pass because we said if we're gonna get all the way to Z, we certainly have to get up to C and D and E and F, right? And I would say that to the point about planting the seed, and if I'm the one who planted that seed, I planted it with Amy, I planted it with Sanford. Neither of them saw it right away. Maybe Sanford from the perspective that, number one, I don't have time for that, and number two, I don't think they're gonna do it. I don't think, that's enough of a reason for him to go in the other direction, and that was more so the original. It's not like if they're down, of course I'm down. That, you know what I mean? You have that energy. It's like, of course, count me in, holler back. And don't hold your breath, brother, right? And to that point, Amy is such an amazing collaborator, co-conspirator, etc., as it relates to this project, the process, and beyond. But I can say that because I was inspired by an initial excitement about the idea when I met Amy. So Amy and Sanford and myself, right there is, you need those are the operating ingredients of the algorithm, like to work. So from what I saw in my mind, those things couldn't be brought together. Eventually, that would have been it.
So when I put that chair there, I put it there on purpose. I kind of manipulated you a little bit because I was hoping you would turn to look in his eyes. Talk to me about sitting in this chair and looking in his eyes.
Well, I've spent a lot of time with this piece now. In fact, I've at points in time when I've had difficulty over this past 2 years with close people, I know that through this process that I've been overexposing myself to something that casts psychic trauma, and I knew I was doing that to myself. And I've certainly built up a resistance to it, but clearly, because I'm crying right now, it's resistance, it's not the bulletproofness. And I think that resistance is something I knew I could endure for the period of time that I needed to for this process to unfold. But it has meant staring at this thing up, down, left, and right, all around, and taking it apart, putting it back together. But there's a power in that, to be able, this is hip hop for me, to be able to scan something, that's sampling. To break it into pieces, that's what DJs and producers do when they're cutting up a record and splicing it together to make it into a completely different, beautiful, new piece of art. That's made from the raw materials of other works. And Sanford and I very much approached this work this way. And for me, that was a lot of my first time with it. After scanning at high resolution, coming back the second time, scanning at high resolution with the right equipment, then you're dealing with this object in a fidelity in the virtual space that's very different. It's very real. And you can go in closer and in more detail than you actually would in real life. And you can wake up and look at it. You can go to sleep and look at it. You can, it's the technical dimension for sure intensified my ability to process the piece, and the taking it apart. And when I say taking it apart, in the computer, once scanned, we, took Abraham Lincoln off of it and the freedman off of it, and then the column that's sitting there off, and then the covered whipping post that's on there off. You're leaving these chains that are there on the base, chains and broken chains that are on the base, and then these separated components that you could look at each one of them individually and really break it down and study it. This decomposition, and then putting it back together, and then saying, I'm going to put it back together differently. We're going to stand this freedman up. That's a first iteration of a response piece that we worked on, was just merely saying, this Frederick Douglass already did a response to this. He was like, dude should be standing up. We could at least do him the solid of sorting that out. Is that our true artistic response? No, but as part of the process, it's like, let's get that out of the way. Keep everything else the same, stand them up, and have them look eye to eye. Changes what this is, changes the narrative here altogether, especially once you've broken everything down, because that column has ton load of icons on top of it and around it as well. So does what looks like it's just a veil or a shroud. When you go on the other side, it is a whipping post that has a ton of iconography on it as well. So each one of these things is just laced with stuff that means stuff. And then when you put them back together, how these symbols are arranged together means something also. So yes, while I've been exposed to this trauma, there is what an immense power to be able to break it down, take it apart, change it, fix things that are not the right thing. That's, for me, a dimension of response and healing in dealing with the object. So, you asked me something more specifically about the eye to eye, but I just had to say the reality for me. Yes, I spent time when I was just spending time with the freedman because there wasn't anything else to look at. Days and days and days without Abe standing over him, and just him. And it's actually very different when you do that. I've looked at him eye to eye, I've walked around him, I've looked at his back, I've looked at his shoulders, his arms, and then, in the actual act of standing him up, using technology to stand him up. That's happened just between me and that personalized now object. It's not really an answer to your question, but hopefully it tells you about my time with the piece in a way that's meaningful for my experience.
I think Mark, it totally is an answer to the question, because I've only experienced his reality under the gaze of all these white folks. I've never had a chance to stand with him eye to eye. I've always seen him under the gaze of all the works that are around him. And so in my head, it's always like, how safe is he to tell me these things? Like, can I? See, I stopped crying. Now I'm gonna start crying again. It's that we know when we're putting each other in danger. Like, we know this. Am I putting him in danger? Even though people are like, it's a statue, it's not real. There is some very real emotion and trauma attached to this. And so it's like, can I even really ask you these questions in this arena? Are you safe am I safe to access my emotions in conjunction with this sculpture or related to this sculpture? And is he, the free man, is he safe to tell me anything in this arena?
I say yes now and not 2 years ago. Because when I came into this room for the first time, it was unchecked, unbalanced. It was just here because the institution said so, thought it should be so, and nobody challenged it. And when there was a challenge to it, ultimately, because when I came in here and was like, really, not just the piece, but all this? Okay, that's a lot. That is a lot. I understand we're in an art museum, right? But who are these people and why are they here? Because if that's what you're focusing on, I don't really get that when I come in here. What I get is, ooh, feels pretty racist and seems like a lot of slaveholders. Now, that's how I feel. There's no information to actually say exactly that that's what it is, but you know what ended up being the case when I did the research on who these sitters are in the subjects of each of these pictures. It was disproportionately people who had significant connections to either the Dutch East India Company or the Dutch West India Company, or attempts to put down the uprising in Haiti, which ultimately led to Haitian independence. You know, there's so many stories of these folks that don't fit the narrative of emancipation and support the narrative of what this object feels like to me, even though it's saying I'm a different thing. So the room, you asked, but can I? And is it safe? Am I safe? Is he safe? And I'm saying, when I came in, I didn't feel safe. It's through the process of being received by Amy and her team, activating the project itself, being able to change the walls and inform the who that we're looking at, so that is now in the databases, that when you look these objects up, you get the real story of who these people are. That's a big step forward. Even the description around that object is because of this project. There's a lot changed, even though it looks very much like what it was. Now, the reason it's still preserved to the extent that it isn't because we believe in this space anymore. It's because we still have to preserve it for more people to respond. It's the same reason that, what we were up against if Amy didn't agree to do the project was that object being boxed, essentially. Put away. It's nobody's problem anymore. That's one of the things we heard. That was one of the potential choices, and they were leaning towards it, in my understanding. So we need to preserve the space through the capture of it, documentation as a virtual reality space that you can walk around and study after it's changed. Our project itself, our exhibition, will hang this room downstairs in the Rolling Gallery. It will be somewhat of a half this room and half lean into the future, where we're showing midway the process of the institution acknowledging its past, considering its future, and in the next space, stepping forward into examples that represent what that future could look like. I'm really excited about that part of the storytelling and that part of how other people's voices are coming in to figure out and to make more complete what the response should be, because there is no one response. You can't get it right with one thing, which is something to the Sanford part of it. That was really him. We were initially going to do this counter monument thing, object, It was really Sanford that brought it from putting me right back in art history mode. Like, Mark, all right, Amy's now down. As soon as she's down now for the plan that I think we're supposed to be doing, right? Okay, now we're making this counter monument object. It's a chimera of sorts or whatever, and everyone's down. Amy's funding it, let's go. Sanford comes in, he's like, I don't know if we should be making counter monuments anymore.
Where is that in your in your theory?
No, it's perfect. It is, because it's part of what he's supposed to add as part of that equation. I never said that I figured out what Sanford was going to do as part of it. I just knew he needed to be a part of it. So with his far broader understanding of art history and how objects fit together and how objects present, and his first challenge to me back in the lab was, you know who Myelin is? And I'm like, sure, I know who Myelin is. He's like, yeah, but you don't know who Myelin is. Go study Myelin. Check her out. You know one thing. He knows me. He's like, you know 1-2 things of Myelin. You know the Vietnam, memorial, and, maybe another thing. You don't really know. Study Myelin for a week. And to understand through that prompt that a response can be a space. It doesn't have to be an object. It can be light, it can be shadow. So that prompt for me, it's a tactic, I know, from Sanford's world. It's a professor, let me give you students something to do, right? So I don't have something to do for the moment. Go do more homework. I don't have anything. But, that is the seed that changed the dimension of the project. I'll say it why, because in saying that, and the first challenge would be like, we're not necessarily gonna make a counter monument. Let's think some other ways first, just do that. And then the next click after that is, we're not gonna make a counter monument, let's bring multiple artists in to respond. And their responses are the counter monument. Right, so Sanford's innovation in this in this thought thing would be that right in that moment, which completely, now you bring that back to Amy, she's like, oh my God, what are these guys talking about? I thought I was gonna get a marble. Now they're on about another thing, but I already had to check we run this at the door from the beginning of the project. We said they're leading the way, it's resourced the way that they asked, let's see where this goes. And it brought this broad dimension of, Pharaoh Monch and Keon Harold and Lenore Route and Wildcat Ebony Brown and the Wide Awakes. And the list now actually goes on and on, because it's not just artists, you have all the professors and students that are here at the institution who are actively responding. And our job in this moment is to collect all these responses, figure out a compelling way to educate, and then share these responses in an exhibition forum with folks in February. Now it's come full circle. Sanford wants to do a response piece. So we've been working on one, right? So that's gonna be a big reveal, because it was really off the table. And so I think now with all this other artist involvement and all this other, he's been goaded into like, all right, well, yeah, so maybe all these people are here because Mark and I asked them to contribute, or some of them started to lean in because they saw what was going on, to your question, right? Because a lot of that's happened now. People coming to us, not necessarily us choosing people. And, you got to bring up people like Guy Route, who then came in if we're at 4 nodes, then you go to 5 when you bring in Guy, because Guy is just a network to an array of talented artists, directors, producers, just, talent in general. So if part of the recipe now is, we myelinin, is that what we doing? Okay, well, now I have to add a new node to make that idea work. Gotta go get Guy. He's the guy that knows everybody, and can get them because they have love for him. That's how you can get a quick turnaround. Like, okay, well, Frau doesn't even understand what it is that we're doing, but guy can call him up and say, you need to show up, this is important, and da 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 da, and he's here. So he becomes part of the glue where you can just reach out into that universe when inspired. By the way, why Pharaoh? Because that's Sanford's favorite MC. It's not out of nowhere. It's generative and consistent with the process, and it's just a random. Not only Jay-Z's favorite MC, but Sanford's favorite MC. Very relevant to why would you even choose him, and he's just brilliant. So things that are, and they've been waiting to collaborate, trying to collaborate for a connection I've been presiding over for 3 years. Similar to this, right? And it has now generated some actual, they have done a piece together. It hasn't shown anywhere yet, but it's actually happened. So I'm just excited to as to where it's grown to, and I'm excited where we're gonna go to wrap it up as well. Yeah.
Do you feel safe in this room now?
You should ask the staff if they feel their room is safe, because we've literally pushed them to their limits of what would fly. I mean, this is why I feel safe. I mean, anything we've asked for to do in here, essentially, we've been told yes. Not immediately, and not without people jumping out of shoes and socks. Because these are firsts. These are firsts. You want to have a band and a DJ and drummers and dancers in Gallery 4. What? What? That doesn't, what are you talking about? Glue in the, what? All these things that are just no and get shut down by the institution, de facto, because it's been that way. If you're in this modality of, well, why is it that way? It's just been that way because it was that way. We know why a lot of those things are the way they were, and now we know that it's not for the right reasons. So we have to be prepared to challenge everything and reconsider when you're saying no, why that actually is. And I would say 95% of the time, that no or that concern has turned into a yes, which has had them, the museum, observe how, even though an idea isn't one that they've ever experienced, and it's novel and it seems challenging, is completely fine and healthy for this environment. It brings new and diverse folks into it to interact. It brings them through their halls to see the other art so they can see themselves in the space and then also feel comfortable. I mean, there's all of these emanating rays of healing that comes from what has been happening in this room. And there have been actual a disturbance of vibration in order to reset it into a direction where I can say what I'm saying. I mean, it has been messed with. It might look closer to what it did in the first place at the moment right now, but the soul of this room has been stirred. People have danced, they have cried, they have blown the horn, they have emceed, they've spoken their words, they have DJs cut, beats been made, hip hop has been blasted. That is in the face of all of this, and that has changed the vibration. There's a lot of people of color who now feel safe to enter this space, and they feel a command in their ability to be able to walk around it and say what it is that they have to say. And we're not done yet, so I think when Gallery 4 is remade after the exhibition, then that'll be the real litmus test of, does everyone feel safe, and is this a model for other problematic spaces in either in this institution or in other institutions? I think that's, for me, back to the science and the network theory. If this case study that we're working on can work, it's being modeled in a way that it can indeed be applied to multiple and other universities, museums, university museums, and that creates the potential of an exponential effect of whatever it is that we figured out for ourselves here. That changes the conversation from a very local one to potentially the national one that it really is.
So, Mark, let's have a more intimate conversation. If you could have a conversation with this freed man, and you can share with me what you want, but what would you want to impart to him? Like, what would you want to share to him if you could have a conversation with him right now?
We got you, homie. You're not going to be kneeling for that much longer. I mean, that you know, your dignity will be restored, and even though a part of you will stand to represent where we have come from, there's a version of us that will stand in the face of the indignities that you've had to suffer for this period of time. So we got you. That's what I got to say.
You've been listening to Meet Me at the Chazen. Our guest, Mark Hines, is the creative director of MASK Consortium, a collaboration of artists based in New York. Meet Me at the Chazen is a production of the Chazen Museum of Art on the campus of UW-Madison in Madison, Wisconsin. For more information about the museum, its collections, and exhibitions, visit chazen.wisc.edu. I'm your host, Gianofer Fields. Thank you for listening.